My name is Allison Puig, and I'm 30 years old. If you really want to understand the storm that came later, everything my parents demanded, everything they expected of me, you need to understand where it started. Because none of this happened overnight. It was built, quietly, brick by brick, beginning the year I turned 16. That was the year my parents invited me to what they called a family meeting. Anyone who's ever been summoned to one of those knows someone's about to get blindsided. This time, it was me. I remember sitting on the living room couch, still in my Burger King uniform, smelling faintly of fries and desperation. My dad was doing that serious chin tuck thing, and my mom was smoothing the wrinkles out of her skirt like she was preparing for a presentation. And then there was Vanessa, my younger sister, sitting cross-legged with a smug smile like she already knew the script. Dad cleared his throat. "We've been thinking about your future, Allison," he began, voice all heavy with importance, "about teaching you real-world responsibility. Back then, I was naive enough to believe this meant something good. Maybe they were going to help me open a savings account. Maybe they'd bought me one of those starter finance books. Maybe, just maybe, they were proud of me for juggling school and a part-time job." "Nope." My mom clasped her hands and gave me her soft but stern look. "We've decided," she said gently, "that it's time for you to start contributing. Just a small amount. It's not about the money, sweetheart. It's about preparing you for adulthood." Then she slid a paper across the coffee table like a landlord presenting a lease agreement. $300 a month, rent, for my childhood bedroom. The room with the broken closet door that hadn't opened properly since I was 10. The room with the water stain on the ceiling from the year the upstairs toilet exploded. The room I'd done my homework in, cried in, dreamed in. 300? I choked. I only make like 600 a month before taxes. Dad leaned back like he'd just delivered a life-changing lesson. "You'll thank us later. You'll learn to manage money responsibly." Across the couch, Vanessa muffled a giggle. I looked at her sharply. "Is she paying rent too, when she turns 16? Dad actually laughed. "Your sister's situation is different." Different. That became the theme of my adolescence. I picked up more shifts. Burger King would only give minors 20 hours, so I begged for doubles and holiday shifts. I stopped doing extracurriculars, dropped sports, lost friends. Most days were school, work, homework, sleep, repeat. Meanwhile, Vanessa, 2 years younger, floated through life like she'd been dipped in gold dust. Cheer squad, free gas, free phone bill, no curfews, no rent, no expectations. Whenever I pointed out the double standard, "Life isn't fair. Don't be jealous. Stop comparing yourself to your sister," they said it like I was the problem. One memory still burns in my mind. When I was 17, I got into a minor fender bender. Not my fault. Police report proved it. But my parents made me pay the $500 deductible myself and grounded me for a month for being careless. But when Vanessa totaled Mom's car doing donuts in a grocery store parking lot at 19, they bought her a new car, a better one. "This is a learning experience," Mom said kindly. "Let's not dwell on it," Dad added. If I dared question it, I was either dramatic or negative. Prom was another story. I wanted to go once. Just once. Had to pay for the dress, shoes, hair, ticket, dinner, everything. I worked double shifts for 2 weeks, came home exhausted, and still barely scraped it together. Vanessa went to 3 proms. 2 weren't even her schools. My parents paid for the dresses, the limo, the hair, the makeup, every time. Prom is more important for girls, Mom told me. I was a girl too, but somehow that never counted. Christmas was always a punch to the gut. I'd get socks, maybe a cheap work uniform, a gift card. Vanessa got a MacBook, designer bags, spa gift sets, a phone. Sometimes all in the same year. One Christmas, I opened a pack of batteries and a $25 Amazon card. Vanessa unwrapped a MacBook Pro. "She needs it for school," Dad said. She dropped out 3 months later. The laptop became a Netflix machine. I graduated high school with a 3.7 GPA while working 30 hours a week. My graduation gift? A $50 Visa card and a reminder that rent is still due on the 1st. I couldn't afford to go away for college, so I enrolled in community college and kept paying $300, then $400 rent, like I was funding a place I never asked to lease. Vanessa? She drifted through jobs, hobbies, finding her passion, dropping out of community college, trying influencing for a month, all while the full parental subsidy rolled in. Rent-free, bill-free, pressure-free. By the time I was 22, I was a zombie, working overnight warehouse shifts, attending classes during the day, barely sleeping, barely functioning. But I graduated with my associate's degree and, miracle of miracles, moved out. Not into anything glamorous. A tiny studio 40 minutes away, $650 a month, barely big enough for a hot plate. But it was mine, my freedom, my oxygen. My parents were offended. "After everything we've done for you," Mom said. "We taught you responsibility," Dad added. I didn't even argue. I just packed my 3 boxes of belongings and left. For the next several years, I lived like a monk. Rice and beans diet, no streaming services, cheap clothes. I worked my way up from warehouse grunt to supervisor to operations manager. I saved every penny. Meanwhile, Vanessa, still living at home into her late 20s, quit jobs like they were seasonal hobbies. My parents praised her for trying new things. They paid her bills, her car, her everything. At holidays, I was a ghost at the table. They'd ask me how work was going. I'd answer briefly, and then they'd spend the next hour talking about Vanessa's latest breakup, hairstyle, or job she'd quit. It wasn't bitterness, it was exhaustion. And eventually, resignation. I accepted that in my family, accomplishment wasn't a currency, only convenience. And I was the one they'd decided it was convenient to drain. But they weren't done. Not even close. They were saving the biggest betrayal for later, something so absurd, so insulting, so brazen, that even after a lifetime of favoritism, I didn't see it coming. Not until I bought my first house, and everything blew apart. Moving into that tiny 40-minute away studio felt like escaping gravity. The walls were thin, the water pressure was pathetic, and the kitchenette was barely big enough for a single pot, but I could breathe. For the first time in my life, I wasn't paying rent to people who called it a life lesson, while funneling the money toward their excuses. I was 22, alone, barely scraping by, but free. And that freedom became fuel. I threw myself into work, not because I loved warehouses or logistics, but because success felt like the only thing I could build that wasn't tied to my parents' rules. I worked the graveyard shift, volunteered for holidays, and took every overtime opportunity they offered. I slept in 2-hour chunks between shifts and classes, surviving on caffeine and spite. My parents never visited, never asked how I was doing, never wondered if I needed help. Honestly, I preferred it that way. Fast forward a few years. I'd climbed from warehouse associate, supervisor, operations manager. My pay grew in small increments, but I never changed my lifestyle. Same crappy apartment, same beat-up Honda, still clipping coupons, still eating store-brand noodles. My coworkers teased me for being frugal, but they didn't understand. I was saving for a future no one had ever planned for me, a future I had to build from scratch. Meanwhile, Vanessa, now in her mid-20s, still lived at home, rent-free, expectations-free, consequences-free. She floated from job to job, boutiques, cafes, reception work, some influencer pipe dream, a wellness coach phase. Every time she quit, it was, she wasn't appreciated. The environment was toxic. She's still finding herself. And every time she ran out of money, my parents swooped in immediately. Holiday dinners were the worst. I'd show up out of guilt, not affection. And the conversations always followed the same script. "So Allison, how's work?" "Good. That's nice." And then they'd spend the next 2 hours praising Vanessa's latest bare minimum accomplishment. "She's thinking about going back to school," narrator voice. She wasn't. She met a new guy. "He's so promising. She's really maturing." I'd sip my water like it was vodka and count the minutes until I could leave. Every accomplishment I achieved meant nothing. Every challenge Vanessa faced became a family emergency. The imbalance wasn't subtle, but I stopped fighting it. You can't argue with a stacked deck. Then, at 27, everything changed. A coworker told me his company was hiring a regional operations director. The position was out of my depth, but I applied anyway. I studied for nights, prepped for interviews obsessively, and somehow, miraculously, got the job. My salary doubled. For the first time ever, I wasn't barely surviving. I had money, real money, not luxury money, but stability money, possibility money. And I guarded it like a dragon guarding treasure. I lived exactly the same apartment, same car, same $20 grocery budget, because I had a new goal. A house, something no one could take from me. Over the next 2 years, I saved relentlessly. My coworkers joked that I lived like a monk. I took it as a compliment. Meanwhile, Vanessa, now 28, finally moved out. Not by choice. My parents told her they were turning her bedroom into my dad's home office, so she moved in with a vape shop manager she'd known for 4 months. 6 weeks later, that relationship crashed worse than her old car. She ended up in a rundown apartment, working part-time at a call center and selling MLM supplements online like she was building an empire. My parents, surprise, paid for the inventory, the conferences, the products, the shipping. Every time she failed, they patched the hole with their wallet and called it support. Not once did they ask if I needed anything. Not once. Then came the day I'd been working toward for almost a decade. I bought a house, a real house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Nothing fancy, but mine. I waited until everything was finalized, keys in hand, before telling my parents. I knew if I told them earlier, they'd either try to talk me out of it or find a way to attach strings to the process. I told them at Christmas dinner. You'd think I said I had joined a cult. Mom's fork froze midair. Dad's eyebrows flew up like he'd heard blasphemy. Vanessa blinked, like she wasn't sure she heard correctly. You bought a house? Mom asked, voice small. Yep, closed last week. Dad's shock morphed into suspicion. How did you afford that? Saved, worked, responsibility. His face went red. You should have consulted us. We could have helped you. Why would I need advice from people who think charging a teenager rent is good parenting? Silence, beautiful, heavy silence. Mom eventually recovered, firing questions like bullets. How much did you put down? What's the rate? Is the neighborhood safe? Did you get it inspected? That's not your concern, I replied. We're your parents, she snapped. Of course it's our concern. Right, but you didn't seem concerned about my finances when you were taking $400 from me every month in high school. Vanessa finally chimed in. Must be nice to have parents who taught you how to save. I looked at her, really looked at her. You had the same parents, they just chose to teach you nothing. That one hit like a grenade. Mom's jaw clenched. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa shrank into her chair. But for once, I didn't shrink with them. They weren't proud. They weren't happy. They were angry. How dare I succeed without them? It was the first time I realized they didn't want a self-sufficient daughter. They wanted someone they could claim credit for. Someone manageable. Someone dependent. And I wasn't that anymore. But I had no idea just how far their entitlement went. I wouldn't find out until they showed up at my front door months later, unannounced, and made the most insane request I'd ever heard in my life. My doorbell rang on a random Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, halfway through a report, when my dog launched into a barking frenzy. I checked the doorbell camera, expecting a delivery driver. It wasn't a delivery driver. It was my parents, both of them standing stiffly on my porch, like they were bracing for impact. I hadn't seen them since Christmas. That alone put every nerve on edge. I opened the door slowly. Hi, what's going on? Dad cleared his throat, the same way he did the night they first charged me rent. Can we come in? We need to talk. I should have said no. I should have trusted the alarm bells clawing up my spine. But curiosity won. That was my mistake. We sat across from each other in my living room, me on the opposite couch, my parents looking like they were sitting in front of a judge, not their own daughter. Mom glanced around at my home, taking in the furniture, the walls, the framed photos. Her eyes lingered on the picture of me and Ethan at the state fair, smiling, arms around each other. Her lips tightened. Dad inhaled deeply. This is about your sister. Of course it was. What about Vanessa? Mom's voice quivered, not with sadness, but with practiced fragility. Allison. She's going through a very hard time. Her apartment building is being sold, and she's being evicted. Okay, I said flatly. And, Dad continued, she lost her call center job last month. Okay. Mom blinked hard, offended by my lack of sympathy. She's struggling, Allison. I raised an eyebrow. And? Mom and Dad exchanged a look, the pre-rehearsed kind. We were hoping, Dad said, that we could work something out, as a family. That word again. Work what out? I asked. Mom leaned forward, hands clasped. You have this big house, 3 bedrooms, plenty of space. You only use 1. We thought maybe Vanessa could move in with you, just temporarily. I actually laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. No, absolutely not. Mom's face fell dramatically. Allison, please, she's your sister. Family helps family. Oh, I asked. Like you helped me at 16 by charging me rent? Dad stiffened. That was different. Right, I said, because I had to learn responsibility. Vanessa, though, she still hasn't learned what a deadline is. Mom flinched. We're not here to argue about the past, she said. We're here to talk about the present. Vanessa needs help. She's almost 30, I said. She can get a roommate, work 2 jobs. Lots of adults do it. Dad sighed. She can't afford rent anywhere, even with a roommate. That sounds like a skill issue, I replied. The look on their faces was priceless, like they'd never heard consequences described out loud before. But then Mom straightened her back, her expression shifting. Resolute, prepared. That's when I knew this wasn't their real ask. This was the warm-up. Actually, she said carefully, we had a different idea, a better one. My stomach tightened. Vanessa moving in is only one option, Dad added. We thought of something more long-term, more stable. Mom nodded encouragingly, her voice softening. What if Vanessa lived in this house permanently? I stared at her. I thought I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? Just hear us out, Dad said quickly. This house is perfect for her, Mom continued. 3 bedrooms, safe neighborhood, good for her mental health, a chance to finally get her life together. And I do what? I asked slowly. Dad clasped his hands. You wouldn't have to move far. My blood ran cold. You want me, I said carefully, to let Vanessa live here rent-free, while I, what? Mom inhaled deeply like she was about to deliver gospel truth. You could move back home with us. My jaw dropped. Dad nodded, proud of the insanity he was unveiling. We'd only charge you $400 a month, much less than your mortgage. Silence crashed into the room. I stared at them, eyes wide, utterly speechless. Then Mom said the words that snapped the last thread inside me. We're thinking you should sign the house over to Vanessa. She needs it more than you do. The world went perfectly still. No sound, no thought, just pure, stunned disbelief. You want me, I said slowly, to give Vanessa my house? Mom actually smiled like she was doing me a favor. We'd make it worth your while. You'd save so much money living with us. Dad added, it's a win-win. For who? I said. How is this a win for me? Dad's tone sharpened. Watch your language. Answer the question. Mom's mask cracked. Her voice tightened. You're being selfish. Selfish? I repeated, stunned. You want me to hand over a house I saved 10 years for and pay you rent again? Vanessa's going to be homeless, Mom snapped. She's been babied for almost 3 decades, I shot back. That's not my doing. That's yours. Dad's jaw clenched. We raised you better than this. No, I said quietly. You didn't. You raised me to survive. You raised her to expect handouts. Well, congratulations. The lesson stuck. Then I stood, pointed at the front door, and said, Get out, Mom gasped. Excuse me? Get out of my house. Dad stood slowly, face red, trembling with rage. You're going to regret this, he hissed. I already regret letting you inside, I replied. They left in a storm of outrage, arguing with each other as they walked to the car. I closed my front door, locked it, leaned against it. And for the first time in my adult life, I finally felt something like power. The next week was hell. Mom's text started innocent. You're breaking this family. Then manipulative. You sleep in a warm bed while your sister suffers. Then accusatory. You've become cold. Money has ruined you. Dad's voicemails were a mix of disappointment and rage, his voice cracking one moment, yelling the next. A 7-minute monologue listing all they'd ever done for me, conveniently skipping the part where I paid their mortgage through high school. Vanessa's texts were exactly what I expected. I can't believe you'd do this. You're supposed to care about your family. You're selfish. You owe me. So I blocked them all. I blocked my parents. I blocked Vanessa. I blocked every number they used to contact me. For the first time in my life, I felt peace. But the storm wasn't over. They had one more weapon left. Extended family. And they were about to unleash all of them on me. Blocking my parents and Vanessa felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. For about 24 hours, I honestly believed the storm was over, that maybe, just maybe, they'd back off after realizing I wouldn't budge. I underestimated them. By the next evening, my phone started buzzing nonstop with unfamiliar numbers. When I finally checked, I found a barrage of Facebook messages and texts from aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade, even one of my mom's church friends. Every message said the same thing. How could you do this to your sister? Family sticks together. Vanessa is blood. You should be ashamed. You're acting heartless. Every one of them had an opinion, yet not a single one volunteered their own house. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Aunt Linda, who once refused to let her nephew stay in her guest room for 2 weeks, sent me a novel-length text about my moral obligation. Cousin Marcus, who borrowed $2,000 from me 3 years ago and never paid it back, texted, You're choosing money over family. You seriously need therapy. I replied, You still owe me $2,000. He responded, That's different. Of course it was. Then came the group chat bomb. Some well-meaning relative screenshotted a family group text where everyone was debating my betrayal. My mom wrote, Allison has forgotten where she comes from. Dad wrote, she's always been selfish. Vanessa added her own flair. She's jealous of me. She always has been. I actually laughed at that. Jealous of a grown woman who couldn't keep a job, an apartment, or a relationship? But here was the best part. None of them, not one, volunteered to take Vanessa in. Not Aunt Linda with her 4-bedroom house. Not Cousin Marcus with his empty basement unit. Not Patricia with her mother-in-law suite. Everyone insisted I should give up my house. Convenient, isn't it? So I sent one message to the group chat. Anyone who thinks Vanessa deserves my house is welcome to give her theirs. And then, absolute silence. 6 hours of group chat purgatory. Then people started quietly leaving the conversation. Cowards. 3 weeks passed with no contact. Then, without warning, an unknown number called. I picked up before thinking. It was my mom. Allison, thank God. Listen, we need to talk about this situation. There is no situation, I said calmly. The answer is no. It was no then. It's no now. It will be no tomorrow. Your sister is living in her car, Mom cried. Her car, Allison. That sucks. She should get a job. How can you be so cold? She snapped. How can you be so blind? You created this. You raised her to believe she'd always be rescued. Silence. Then Mom tried bargaining. What if she pays rent? A normal tenant arrangement. Does she have a job? I asked. A deposit? References? You know she doesn't. Then we're done talking. Allison, please. Don't call me again unless it's a real emergency. And Vanessa's irresponsibility isn't an emergency. I hung up, blocked the number. The peace afterward was glorious. Life moved on. My world kept growing while theirs stayed frozen in entitlement. Ethan moved in a month later. He'd been supportive through everything. Steady, rational, protective in a quiet way. The night I told him about the house request, he'd blinked twice, stared at me, and whispered, They seriously thought you'd agree to that? Yep. Your family is something else, to put it politely. He came from a healthy family. Watching mine was like watching a wildlife documentary. Dangerous animals fighting over territory. One night, while we sat on my back porch watching the sunset, he asked, Do you feel guilty at all? I thought about it, really thought. No, I said. I spent 16 years being taught that my needs don't matter, that sacrifice is normal, that Vanessa deserves special treatment. I'm done sacrificing. He nodded, took my hand. I'm proud of you. That simple sentence hit harder than anything my parents had ever said to me. Then came the truth I never expected to hear. My Uncle Steve, Dad's older brother, and the only reasonable person in the family, asked to meet me for coffee. No ambush, no agenda, he promised. Just a conversation. We met at Starbucks halfway between our houses. He bought my drink. That alone told me something unusual was coming. He sighed once we sat. Your parents are pissed at me. Why? Because I told them they were completely out of line. I almost choked on my latte. You did? Hell yes. What they asked from you is insane, and you need to know something your dad never told you. He leaned in. When they charged you rent at 16, it wasn't to teach responsibility. I stared at him. What? Your mom lost her job that year. They were short on the mortgage. They used your rent money to cover bills. They just convinced themselves it was a lesson to feel better. I sat there, stunned. Every memory of my teenage years flashed through me. Working after school, crying quietly while counting tips, watching Vanessa get privileges I never had. I'd been a child paying my parents' bills. Uncle Steve continued. And Vanessa? They spoiled her because your mom felt guilty. She thought she was too hard on you, so she tried to do better with your sister, overcompensated like crazy. My chest tightened, anger surging hot and sharp. So let me get this straight, I said. I was punished because they were broke, and she was pampered because they felt bad. That's exactly what happened. And now they want me to fix the monster they created? Yep. I sat back, stunned. But it all made sense. Every decision, every double standard, every guilt trip. My childhood wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. And now they wanted to extend that pattern into my adulthood by demanding the one thing I built entirely on my own. Not anymore. 6 months passed. My life, better than ever. I got another promotion, $130K salary. Ethan and I started talking about engagement. We planned a vacation to Japan. I deleted Facebook. No more family drama. No more poison. Then Thanksgiving rolled around. And they tried one last time. The doorbell camera chimed. There they were, my parents and Vanessa, standing on my porch, arms crossed, faces tight. They rang the bell, knocked, rang again. Ethan and I watched from the couch, Thai takeout on our laps. After 5 minutes, Dad pulled out his phone. My phone rang. I ignored it. Then Ethan's phone rang. He picked up. "This is Ethan." A sharp inhale on the other end. "Hello. This is Allison's mother. We know you're home. We just want to talk." Ethan answered calmly. "He doesn't want to talk to you." "This is between family," she snapped. "I'm going to be Allison's family soon," he replied, "and I'm telling you to leave before we call the police." "You can't be serious." Click. Ethan hung up and turned to me. "Should I actually call the cops?" "Give them 5 minutes." They left in 3, and that was that. No more calls, no more texts, no more guilt. Uncle Steve later told me Vanessa finally got her life together, got promoted at her new call center, found a decent roommate, actually learned to budget. Good for her. But her journey, her growth, her struggles? Not my responsibility, never was. I have my home, my peace, my partner, my life. And I'm finally free.